This is a webinar by the Secure Technology Alliance on how to plan, procure, and deploy PIV-Enabled PAC systems. This is the fourth in a series of educational webinars that the Secure Technology Alliance has put together for you, and I hope you're going to enjoy today's content and speakers. My name is Randy Vanderhoof, and I'm the Executive Director of the Secure Technology Alliance, formerly known as the Smart Card Alliance. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be available for playback along with the presentation deck after the webinar has been concluded. Also, at the end of the presentation, there'll be time for questions, and I encourage our listeners to submit their questions using the user dashboard that's located on your screen. I will return at the end of the presentation to lead the Q&A session, and I encourage you to submit questions while the speakers are presenting so that we have time to organize them in advance so we can get to as many of them as possible in the time that we have left over. So next slide, please. So let me introduce the other presenters for today's webinar. We will begin with Lars Suneborn, who is the Director of Training Programs for the Alliance and former chair of the Access Control Council. And prior to joining the Alliance, he has spent many years as a PACS system engineer, sales, and security expert for several global security organizations. We also have Kevin Mitchell, who is the Schedule 84 branch chief for the General Services Administration under the Federal Acquisition Services Division. We also have with us from the General Services Administration, Daryl Hendricks, who is the Deputy Program Manager for IT Specialists at the GSA. And then rounding out our presentation speakers today, we have Jason Rosen. He is the Associate Director for Physical Security Division at the U.S. Capitol Police. So next slide. So for those of you who are not familiar with the Secure Technology Alliance, here's a brief overview for you. So our mission as an organization is to stimulate the understanding, adoption, and widespread application of secure solutions. And we do this in a multi-industry fashion in a collaborative, member-driven environment where we provide education and information about how smart cards, embedded chip technologies, and related security hardware and software can be adopted across all of the markets in the United States. Now that's a fairly broad vision, and on the right side of your screen, you can see the principal markets where we focus these activities towards, and that includes certainly access control, the subject of today's webinar, as well as topics like authentication, healthcare, identity management, the emerging Internet of Things, the mobile marketplace, the payments industry, as well as transportation. And you can see that our members generate benefits from participating in the Alliance in terms of being able to have access to certification and participation in industry councils, educational activities, outreach to other industry groups, networking, and keeping you up to date with technology trends. And so across the industry, our member-supported organizations, we do the following things really to stimulate the market by bringing people together, stakeholders, to effectively collaborate on promoting these secure technology solutions and addressing the industry challenges in implementing them. We also publish white papers. We do webinars like today, workshops, newsletters, position papers, and update much of our content, of our information on our Secure Technology Alliance website and other website resources. We run conferences and events that focus on specific markets and technologies. In fact, we are just ready to announce our government-focused Securing Federal Identity event, which will be coming up in June, and we encourage all of you to consider attending that event. We offer other educational programs, training, and industry certifications, which you're going to hear about more detail shortly. And we provide networking opportunities for professionals to share ideas and knowledge and produce strong industry communications through our outreach with public relations, web resources, and social media and other outlets that we provide. So the next slide. So the Access Control Council is one of 7 industry councils supported in the Secure Technology Alliance. And the focus of the Access Control Council is to accelerate the widespread acceptance, use, and application of secure technologies in various form factors for physical and logical access control. I don't know if others are not seeing the slide change here, but if you, okay, there we go. Sorry about that. So the mission again for the Access Control Council is accelerating the widespread acceptance, use, application of secure technologies in the various form factors for physical and logical access control. And this group brings together in an open forum leading users, technologists for both the public as well as the private sectors of our marketplace. On the right-hand side, you see a fairly detailed list of some of the deliverables that have been produced by the Access Control Council. And I would just highlight a few of the most important ones that you should come back and look for in the future are the FICAM roadmap and implementation guidance, understanding the FIPS 201 standards for use and access control, guidance for the architect and engineering of PACS in non-government systems, the role of smart cards and use of biometrics and access control systems, logical access control, and using PIV credentials for mobile devices are some of the best in this lot of materials. So now if I would go to the next slide, I'd like to introduce Lars Suneborn, again, our Director of Training, who's going to talk to you about the National Training Center and its training programs. So Lars?
Thank you, Randy. And next slide, please. So I am in the National Center for Advanced Payment and Identity Security, and I am in charge of the Educational Institute. And we have put this seminar and series of seminars together with the Access Control Council. Some of the certifications that Randy mentioned here during the introduction are listed here. CSCIP, that stands for Certified Smart Card Industry Professional, and that is a broad-based description and certification on how smart embedded technology can work for identity credentialing, identity management, some limited payment applications and transit applications and parking application. We have one that is building on the same fundamentals as that is called CSCIP for payment, and that is focused on payment and payment applications. We have companies there such as credit card issuers, payment terminals, payment networks, and payment processing companies that are participants on this. And we have a global membership on this. CSCIP-G, that is the same basic fundamentals, but it is focused strictly on government. It is focused on identity management, certificate management, and credential management for PIV and PIV-I and DoD CAC cards. And perhaps the one that we have most activity with is Certified System Engineer for ICANN PACS. That is a three-day education program. And we have both lecture that talks about the legislative and regulatory framework, how the access control system manufacturer have had to modify and re-engineer the systems to achieve compliance. And we talk also about how people can design and engineer and install this. And we have a hands-on piece here where people actually get to use APL-listed equipment and make them work from scratch to end. We also have a module here where we combine use of the PIV card for both physical access and logical access. Next slide, please. And as OMBA 130 states, PACs are not part of the IT infrastructure. And that is what has caused quite a bit of change in the way systems are designed, deployed, and engineered. And this series of webinars intend to address these. Next slide, please. So this is, as Randy said, the 4 series. In the previous sessions, the first session, we talked about how to do the risk and threat assessment and establish the baseline for what this series of webinars is trying to achieve. The second session after that that dealt with establishing scope of work. And this session here, this is the one that takes that scope of work and the baseline and converts this into an actual procurement. And we are going to talk today about how the procurement will work, the legislative and the regulatory framework that our contracting officer within the federal agencies have to comply with. And with this, I am very pleased to turn this over to Kevin Mitchell.
Next slide, please. Thank you, Lars. This is Kevin Mitchell, and again, I'm the Schedule 84 Branch Chief. And today I'm going to be speaking specifically about GSA's role and then the Schedules program's role in handling potential procurement for a PAC system. As stated, the directive from OMB established GSA's role in order to test and approve the processes for contractors wanting to sell these products and services to the federal government. Today, this is known as the Approved Products List, or APL. It is managed by GSA at idmanagement.gov. These testing standards that ID management are based off of are established by the Federal Identity Credential and Access Management, or FICAM. FICAM also manages the design, development, implementation of federal public key infrastructure, and also they co-chair the Interagency Federal PKI Policy Authority to uphold digital certificate standards for government-wide trusted digital identity and transactions. Next slide, please. The FICAM group also has some very good templates and playbooks that are out there. The first one listed here is the Roadmap and Implementation Guide that has been previously mentioned. The next link here is to the FICAM Architecture Playbook. There's also a Usage Guide Playbook, a PKI Guides Playbook, and then there's a link here for the NIST Computer Security Resource Center. And then the final link here, we will be focusing a little bit more on the presentation, is the PACS Ordering Guide. And the PACS Ordering Guide is kind of the template that can be utilized for ordering agencies to use when issuing out RFIs, RFQs, statements of work, things of that nature. It was developed in conjunction with both Schedule 70 and 84 for the buying community to be able to utilize and simplify the procurement process for a PAC system. Next slide, please. This slide is taken directly from the buyer guide, and it's basically just a template that can be utilized for buying agents to use in order for them to send out an RFQ. What this spreadsheet does, it allows the vendors that are responding to that RFQ to just kind of fill in the blanks on the type of equipment that they're offering, the brand name, and if you look at the next column, that's the approved product number, approved products list number that came from ID management, which ensures that the buyers know that the products are being offered are meeting the federal standards. Next slide, please. ID management also certifies people, as Lars has previously mentioned, by going through the required classes. And once they go through those classes, they submit their certifications to ID management for those people to be listed as certified engineers and different labor categories in order to be utilized for procurement. And that's where these can be found on ID management as well. Next slide, please. And this is just another example that's taken from the buyers, the PACS Ordering Guide, the buyer's guide for labor categories. It's set up the same way as the product side, except it's listed the labor categories, the specific activities that are going to be performing, and then the CSCIP expiration date, verifying that the people that they're presenting to perform the work at the facility have actually been approved as part of the APL. And with that, I will turn it over to Jason Rosen to discuss OMB's role.
Good afternoon, everybody. So back when HSPD 12 was signed off on by President Bush, there was a series of OMB memorandums that gave guidance to the agencies and the departments about how they were to implement and who was on the hook for actually doing this. And so, as you can see from the slide, this directive applied to all executive branch departments and agencies, and it applied to the full-time government employees and the contractors that were employed by those agencies that had regular routine access and greater than 6 months, was basically the DMARC. Additionally, it was all federally controlled facilities and federally controlled information systems. That's why we have the PIV card for logging on and for getting through the doors. So when all this was coming about, the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory protested that they didn't feel that being a laboratory that they should have to comply with this, and that lawsuit actually went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the federal government, and then mandated that even if you're a laboratory, you were still on the hook to comply with the HSPD 12 requirements. So if you'd like to see a copy of that memo, which is also on idmanagement.gov, you can also go to the link that's down below. Next slide, please. So we're getting ready to put together a solicitation to get what we need to implement this FIPS 201 compliant PAC. So we need to figure out who our stakeholders are, and I think two of the obvious ones are your physical security people and your CIO people. In doing this a few times, it's really a better approach if we can get all the stakeholders up front and identified with their roles. So we obviously want to try and get our CIO folks, project managers, and in-house people all on the same page at the meeting. As far as our equipment, oh wait. As far as I'm sorry, I got thrown off on an order. Okay. So when we're looking at the installers that have to be used, we're on slide 15, is that correct?
On slide 16, Jason.
My apologies. So we're looking at determining stakeholder responsibilities, and we established the roles and responsibilities, and then we're going to look at physical security is going to determine the PACS equipment, the head-end controllers, the readers, and the associated systems, such as IDS and the CC video equipment. Because usually you're buying a suite of a product, and then your installation, you're going to use GSA approved service providers. That's per the FAR 4.13. And then in addition to those service providers, they should also have the CSCIP certification that goes along with the services that they've been approved to conduct. Next slide, please. So when you go to the approved products list, you've got basically three types of equipment that you're going to be looking for the approval number for, and they deal with the PACS infrastructure, like the server, the app, the control panels. Then you're going to look for the certificate validation system that you'll want to use, and there's an APL number that goes with that. And then obviously you'll be looking at the readers, depending on how many factors and how you want to deploy the system. Next slide, please. So here you have a depiction of the zones of circulation, and this could be from facility to facility, it could be from floor to floor, and here you're looking at a depiction from the NIST 800-116 document that this is from the old the old document. There's a new one that's waiting to be put out that's kind of been put on hold for quite a while now, just so that it came up to more of a mature standard. But as you can see in this picture, the zones of circulation, you have a controlled area in green, a limited area in orange, and a red, an exclusionary section in red. Now, depending on the agency that you're with and how you define things, first of all, an agency may have a controlled or limited area that may not cross-match with how it's articulated in 800-116. But for purposes of explaining this and for purposes of trying to get you to understand what factors should go with where, first of all, it starts with your risk assessment. So you're assessing the risk of each one of these areas or buildings or facilities, however you're going to deploy the equipment. And if we use the example here on the picture, all the entryways going into the green area, which would be your lowest level, you may put just one factor reader there. Then as you move to another area, we'll call it the orange area or the limited area, maybe you'll put two-factor readers there. And then going into the red area, which is more sensitive or more secure, you'll want a three-factor reader. There's no mandate saying that you have to have a 1 or 2 or a 3 in any particular area, because that's at the agency's discretion based on your risk acceptance. What you do have to have, though, are multi-factor authenticated or multi-factor readers that can actually do the read. Next slide, please. So some of the key points that you want to ensure that are in your solicitation, configuration management is really important. So your FIPS and your NIST documents, and some of your IT documents, your agency policy, you need to make sure that how these things are getting, how the equipment is getting configured aligns with all those requirements and source documentation or documents. And everybody needs to agree, or at least the owner of that particular entity approves what's going on, so that some contractor's just not coming in, populating whatever configurations you need, and then you've got issues on compatibility on the compatibility side. Excuse me. Next, you should have a testing plan. This is really important because you've got your approved vendor with your approved products, but you want to make sure that the plan or how all the equipment's coming together is getting tested, and there should be a documented plan to come back and say, here's the steps that we took, here's the boxes that we checked, yes, everything works, and then you have that documentation for later if you need it for auditing purposes or to refer back to at a later date. Don't wait till the end of the project to do this. You should have the testing plan up front, and that's something that you should be working on with your vendor. The next point is training. A lot of people overlook this because maybe you're just not thinking about it, or maybe it becomes an afterthought, but you want to document all the training that people are going to have to go through, everybody from your administrators on roles and responsibilities to your end users, depending on how your architecture set up. If you've got client workstations, there's rules of engagement, how granular do administrative rights go up and down. All that should be in your training plan, so people understand what am I able to do, what am I not able to do, what was I able to do before, but now I can't do that anymore. So make sure that those booklets are available, and probably best to be them online so that they can be updated. Next slide, please. So commissioning. At the end of every project, if you're a project manager, you know that you want to commission the project. So after you've tested everything, you should have a commissioning plan. Everybody should be on the same side. And this is basically where the government's going to assume assumed the responsibility of taking the project from the contractor. We've vetted everything that looks right, and we say that we're good to go. The next point is a standard operating procedure. So as I was saying earlier, in training, okay, the standard operating procedures and the training document almost work hand in hand because you've identified roles and responsibilities, but now your SOPs are really, you know, this is how things are going to get used, and these are the people that are going to be able to use it. And, you know, the job's not finished until the paperwork's done, and having some SOPs in hand to hit the ground running will make your life a lot easier up front. And then lastly, which is something that I think that people overlook and don't give enough attention to, is a life cycle management strategy. So in the physical security world, we've had habits of driving things until they break and then replacing them. In the IT world, a life cycle management could end up being 18 months because the next version is right around the corner. Doesn't mean the right version might be the right thing for you, but it's getting cycled. But over the period of time, things start to become obsolete. Things stop being supported by manufacturers. Companies get bought, and then you start to get to a place where you can't continue the steady state of operations and you need to upgrade. So having a life cycle management plan is important, and the often looked SP 864 will help you deal with that. And I'll turn the next slide over to, I believe it's Kevin.
Yep. Thank you, Jason. Appreciate it. So next we're going to talk about potential contracting vehicles that can be used for the procurement of a PAC solution. Today I'm going to speak specifically about scheduled solutions because that's my wheelhouse. So that's what we're going to talk about next. Next slide, please. One of the avenues that agencies can use to procure a PAC system is on Schedule 84. Schedule 84 currently has SIN, special item numbers, that are established for both products and services depending upon what the buyer needs and also what the contractors offer. The SIN for SIN 246357, and there are currently 19 contractors who have been awarded this SIN. It's important to note that every contractor that has been awarded this SIN have products that are approved on the APL. And one of the jobs of my COs when modifying contracts to add this SIN or for new contractors that are submitting offers is to verify that anyone who is offering the products and services have products that are actually on the APL. For services, the SIN is SIN 24660-5, and there are currently 20 contractors on Schedule 84 who have been awarded this SIN. It's also important to note that everyone who is awarded this SIN have at least one person within the organization who has been through the CSCIP class that Lars previously spoke about. And I'm also happy to announce that next week, Lars will actually be in Fort Worth conducting this training for 4 people within the region so that Schedule 84 will have our own staff who has the ability to be certified as part of the program as well. So that's very encouraging and a good step for Schedule 84. Next slide, please. Something that's also unique to Schedule 84 is the offering of ancillary products and services. Next slide. There you go. And that's offered under SIN 246-1000. And what this SIN does, it allows for service providers that may need to offer product as part of an installation, whether it be wiring or cabling, routers, servers, cloud storage, anything that a contractor would need to offer in order to provide that total solution to the customer, to the buyer, is going to be available through the 246-1000 SIN. What's important to note on this SIN also is these products or services are not standalone in that they cannot be procured by themselves. So if you're a service provider or if you're buying services from a Schedule 84 contractor, but you also need cabling to take place and storage once the data is collected. You cannot go to the CN 246-1000 and buy those servers, those cabling, that storage is a standalone. It has to be purchased in conjunction with one of the other 246 CINs, whether that be the product CIN or the services CIN. Next slide, please. And to that, I'm going to hand it over to Daryl to speak specifically about Schedule 70 offerings.
Thank you, Kevin. As mentioned, I'm Daryl Hendricks, and like Kevin, I work for the General Services Administration Federal Acquisition Service, but I'm in a different unit called the Managed Services Office, and it is part of GSA Schedule 70 section. As for our offerings, we primarily do the products and service under special item number 13262. And that's tied to the Homeland Security Presidential Directive 12. And most of the products that we do are the IT systems for the actual electronic PACS system hardware. Generally, that is under Kevin's side of the shop. And that's the Schedule 84 side, which Kevin just spoke to. As part of the requirements, our SIN 13262 offers peer credential enrollment and registration services, system infrastructure, mostly on the IT side, but that can include the PACS IT side, card management and production services, card finalization. That's actually the printing and data instantiation of the peer credential itself. And we have basically integration services on the physical access control side. Mostly that has to do with certifying your backend server for authority to operate. And that's a requirement under the OMB circular that made those backend systems for PAC systems part of the federal IT information technology infrastructure. So they do require an ATO that's generally signed off and maintained by the Chief Information Office group. Primarily what we do is logical access products and services. We help the agencies integrate their logical access programs with their peer credentials. And again, I mentioned the integration services, and everything we do, just like Kevin mentioned, must be FIPS 201 compliant products and services. And with that, I'll let it go back to Kevin for the next slide.
Appreciate it, Daryl. Next, we're going to talk about draft documents that can be utilized. If you look here in the center, there's a actual Word document, which is the PACS ordering guide. And we're going to talk a little bit about what available documents are available in the PACS ordering guide. And then we're going to talk a little bit about FAR 8.4 and some procurement vehicles that are out there in order to issue your RFQ and your solicitation. So the syntax that's here below the PACS ordering guide is basically a template that can be presented to from a buyer to the contractors, which would lay out their recommendation based on what the buyer's need is for a system. The items that are there in parentheses right now could actually be replaced with the actual offering specific products that the contractor intends to present as part of the response. So this is really what can be used for either an RFI or an RFQ at the buying side in order for them to provide this information to the contractors so they get responses back in a manner that's going to make it easier for them to be able to evaluate the responses that they receive. Next slide, please. The guidance that is established for buying off of schedules can be found in FAR 8.4. If you're not familiar with FAR 8.4, I'd highly encourage you be familiar with that, because this is where all the guidelines are laid out for buying off of a schedule. It lays out specifically requirements for orders that are that require statement of work for those that are below the micro purchase threshold and below the SAT. And then it also has requirements on the next slide for those that are above the SAT. And the main difference between those is where the RFQ has to be posted and how many people that it has to be posted to. One of the good things about the schedules program from an ease of procurement perspective is that if you have orders that you're going to fulfill that are less than the SAT, and you have the ability to go out to GSA Advantage or search online for those contractors that provide those services, and if you can find 3 schedule providers, you can get responses back from them, and you've met your competition requirement, and you can award based solely on what you can find out on GSA Advantage or through the issuing of an RFQ to those 3. It's also important to remember that as part of this process, you need to ensure when sending out the RFQ that you send it out to enough people to at least get back those 3 responses so that you've met your competition. Next slide, please. Again, this is basically some of the same guidance as provided in the previous slide, but it's more specifically to orders that are greater than the SAT. The main thing to note here is that if you have orders that are greater than the SAT and you're wanting to be a scheduled procurement, you do have to issue that RFQ through GSA eBuy. Next slide, please. And then speaking specifically about GSA eBuy, what I've done here is I've provided a link to where you can get to GSA eBuy, and then I've got some instructions here. It's important to note that the eBuy is the preferred method for scheduled procurement in order to post your RFQ. It's the preferred method in order to post your awardees. It's important also to note that state and local governments through the cooperative purchasing program also have the ability to procure products and services from both Schedule 70 and Schedule 84. The end of this, the middle of this slide talks about kind of the process that you can follow for a procurement. It lays out the details regarding on how to issue the RFQ, documentation that's required in order to determine who the awardee is going to be, and it provides also steps on what you need to do in order to award the contract in eBuy. If you need more specific instructions on how to utilize eBuy, there's a link at the bottom of this slide in the tutorial. And then myself and my team are also always available to anyone that needs more information regarding Schedule 84, FAR 8.4, or GSA eBuy. And with that, I will turn it back over to Daryl.
And again, thank you very much, Kevin. One of the important things about the procurement, which is pretty much getting everything started, is the funding. So funding can be one of the most important pieces of the PACS procurement and lifecycle management puzzle. As mentioned, the HSP 12 directive made those back-end systems part of the federal information systems. And with that, they'll need an authority to operate, and they'll need lifecycle management, which was mentioned, I think, by Jason, about the fact that technology may be obsolete in 18 months. So there's often technological refreshes, as well as other issues that you may require funding throughout the lifecycle management of the project. Next slide, please. Okay, obtaining funding. Probably the key part of the requirements. You'll need money for procurement. That'll help you establish need for the people and the time needed to put the procurement together and make the award. One important part of that funding is what we call the independent cost estimate, or the ICE or ICE. Really important. They are holding us to our feet to the fire substantially on our cost estimates. So you want to be extremely accurate when you make those estimates. Implementation. This will include funding for your design phase, your planning phase, your installation, and pretty much importantly, the pre and post testing of the system. And of course, you'll need life cycle sustainment funding to help maintain the system throughout its life cycle, periodic technical refresh if needed. And one important thing for the agencies they have to keep in mind is whether they're going to be using funding from a single fiscal year or a multiple fiscal year, because pretty much it's very difficult to make that funding crossover fiscal years. Next slide, please. Okay, the biggest part of the cycle is the proposal evaluation. It's important to establish an accurate timeline that will affect cost. If you let those things slip, that can really throw your funding out of whack. You want to determine team membership. That includes technical team, the cost team, a legal team, and an award team. And occasionally there are some other teams that may be involved, as the procurement may require. Utilize the evaluation criteria. It should be written and approved before the procurement is sent out. And it's important that the agency, stick to that criteria when they are doing that evaluation. Once the proposals are in, they're scored, and the teams will each build a consensus based on that scoring that each member will agree to. Next slide, please. And then the biggest part is to start the whole installation and procurement process going is the contract award. As mentioned, it can be based on a criteria that's either best value, technically, other criteria is technically acceptable with lowest price. Now, it's referred to as lowest price technically acceptable. But since I'm a technical guy, I always put technically acceptable first, because I think that's pretty much more important, because it can be the lowest price, but if it doesn't meet the technical criteria, you probably shouldn't make that award. There are a number of trade-offs that aren't mentioned too often in the lowest price technically acceptable award. Past performance trade-off. If for some reason it's determined that that particular offerer cannot meet the performance, even though they may be technically acceptable based on the proposal and with the lowest price, you may not want to add it because of what how they performed in the past. Also, we have what's called a full trade-off. You don't see this a lot. It's pretty hard to make them happen. It can be past performance and other stated criteria. It may not be the lowest price. It could be a higher price, but it may involve better requirements that meet the solution better, I should say. It can also be based on a service delivery judgment. And this is based on a rational decision. When those happen, they generally come from somebody higher, like an executive, a senior executive, who will make that judgment and pass it down to the awards team. Finally, a final decision is made. They basically sum up the results of the technical and costing, the legal recommendation, the executive manager, occasionally other members, and the award is made. It is up to the contracting officer to make the award notification to those who made offers. And finally, all vendors have a right to a debrief. Often they have to request that debrief. In other words, at that point, the contracting officer will meet with the vendor and tell them where they kind of missed the mark. And with that, I think we go to Lars for the next slide.
Thank you, Daryl. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this was session 4 and illustrates some of the regulatory framework that our friends at the federal side have to consider when they place an RFI or an RFP or an RFQ out there for us to supply on. And the intent here was to give everybody a little insight and maybe make your responses, your RFP's responses, a little bit more easier to fill out and make understand what it is that the people that are going to evaluate your proposal are looking for. The next session in this series, session number 5, that will talk about once a company has been awarded a contract, the deployment, and that will be session number 5 on March 15. Session number 6, that will be April 19, and that is lessons learned. That will be a little bit different format. It will be a little bit more free form, and we will accept questions from the audience. We solicit questions before that session and during this session. And with that, I'd like to go to the next slide and turn this over to Randy Vanderhoof for the question and answer session. Thank you.
Thank you, Lars, and also special thanks to Kevin Mitchell, Daryl Hendricks, and Jason Rosen for their participation today and the great content that they provided us this afternoon. We do have a few more minutes to do some questions before we sign off today. So again, a reminder, if you do have some questions, you can type them into the box on the dashboard of the GoToWebinar. And we'll try to get to as many of our questions today as possible. So the first question I have is directed to Daryl, and it says that you said that the technical proposal evaluation score can be high and win the contract, even if it is not the lowest cost. Can you clarify the priority?
Sure. Again, it's really the priorities are set before the proposal even goes out for either RFI or RFQ. So basically, a lot of times, if the technical evaluation part is scored higher, the final evaluation, then that's because they're doing the best value. So the most common example of technical requirements being a higher weight is if they're going to do a best value. So best value doesn't have to be the lowest price. It will be what they think is not only a good price, but also maybe in some cases technically superior. But that for the civilian side, I can tell you that's pretty rare. It is more common on the Defense Department side and in some of the intelligence agencies. They don't have the same requirements as because they perform a security mission, they don't have all the same requirements of an everyday civilian agency. So that can determine that. Does that kind of answer that one?
Yes, I did. Thank you, Daryl. Okay, next question is for Kevin. Kevin, you spoke about Schedule 84 and its use for getting to vendors to deliver solutions. And OMB Memo A130 states that PACS systems are IT assets. Will GSA promote the use of Schedule 70 with some crossover ability to leverage Schedule 84 for systems and solutions that are more complete security solutions that include things like video and life safety systems?
So that's a good question. So the way I'll answer that is that I think that Schedule 84 and Schedule 70 have done a very good job of providing, working together to be able to provide total solutions to the end users. And while it is determined that the PACS is an IT solution, it does not prevent vendors on Schedule 84 to provide those solutions as part of a PACS system. There are IT pieces of it. I think everybody agrees with that, but also I think you can share the intent of what the PACS system is. It's for the security and the protection of that building and the people that are in that building, which falls directly in scope with Schedule 84 and security and protection products and services. So just because there may be an IT piece associated with the PACS system, it does not preclude Schedule 84 contractors, vendors to have IT type solutions on 84 as part of the total solution to the end user. Because what we don't want to have happen is you have an end user that needs that solution and they can't find it either through a single schedule or through some type of teaming arrangement between a Schedule 84 provider and a Schedule 70 provider. And again, we work pretty well with Schedule 70 when those things come up to help provide that total solution for the customer.
Randy, this is Jason. I have something to add on that.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
So, although the A130 is a new document that Carol at OMB worked really hard on and included the physical security or the PACS, excuse me. If you follow the FISMA Act, I believe of 2002, and we've had there were a lot of conversation around this going to the FICAN meetings. The FISMA Act says that if you have a piece of technology that has an assignable IP address then it falls under FISMA. And so just because you have a physical security piece of equipment that has to have some other requirements doesn't mean that now all of a sudden the CIO takes this over. I mean, obviously, it's going to come down to the agency's prerogative on how they want to delineate responsibilities. But a PACS is a PACS, and it's a physical access control system. And I always say, hey, everybody's pointed in the same direction, and that's why you need to have the stakeholders with the partnerships and define the responsibilities, because my PACS is going to get its maintenance and updates probably through my IT, not from my physical security. But as physical security, I'm still the system owner, and so there's a partnership there. Just like if you have a financial management system that's running on your IT network or on your systems, that the CIO doesn't become the financial manager. They operate what's inherently theirs, and then what needs to get done on the financial side belongs to your CFO. So it's analogous.
Okay, thanks for that clarification, Jason. We have another question here with regard to Schedule 84 and 70. I'm not sure if this would be for Kevin or Daryl or both. So my company has a Schedule 84 GSA contract. How can we bid on the IT Schedule 70 portions of that?
So I'll speak to that. So if there is a solicitation that comes up that references specifically a requirement of a SIN in Schedule 70, unfortunately that 84 contractor is not going to be able to respond to that solicitation. Now, if you run across those and you have the solution available on 84, there's nothing preventing that contractor from making the buyer aware of, hey, I currently hold a Schedule 84 contract, and I have the ability to provide those services to you under my Schedule 84. Would you consider including Schedule 84 offerings as part of your solicitation as well, not just a Schedule 70? And again, that's where it's important for communication to take place between the two schedules. As Jason previously mentioned, we have the same goal here, and that is to be able to provide a security solution to our end users. So we need to be able to work together with our industry partners to figure out the best way for that procurement to take place in order to meet the requirements of that end user. Daryl, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, this is a question that comes up quite frequently in my realm. What I generally say is you have a couple ways you can possibly address it. One is if it's an IT Schedule 70 procurement, perhaps you can be a subcontractor or partner with that Schedule 70 or with a Schedule 70 vendor, and you can provide the electronic physical access system hardware components. And that's one of the things I mentioned as part of my presentation. We cover a lot of everything on the IT side, but we don't cover the hardware for the PAC system, the readers, the controllers, and often not even the back-end servers. But because they're federal information systems now, they must be considered under the FISMA, as mentioned. So they have to have that authority to operate and that security review process. So that's generally where our integrators will come in. Generally, those who do the readers, the controllers, and the back end, they'll continue to do that under their Schedule 84. But when they need that ATO, they'll turn to one of our SIN 132 integrators to help them. They'll partner with them to help them through that process. But I'm generally available. If you have those types of questions, you want more details, certainly send me an email or give me a call, and I'll try to help you navigate that process.
Okay, thank you. One more question here. Is GSA considering the development of a PACS as a service program similar to that of the U.S. Access Program for PIV card issuance?
Kevin, you want to take that, or you want me to take a stab at that one?
I mean, you know, that's a good question. I don't know that. I think the two things are mutually exclusive of one another, because you have the U.S. Access Program, which is specifically for the PIV cards and the identification associated with those cards. And while that's a piece of the PAC system, again, as we've talked about today, it's not the only piece. You've got readers and things that take place in the PAC system that are separate from the PIV card. The PIV card is basically just the way that access is granted. So I don't know that it would necessarily be considered specifically like the U.S. Access Program, but I can see where there's correlation between the two.
So this Jason has something to add on that.
Okay, go ahead, Jason.
So if you were to put a PACS in a cloud, a private cloud, and use a PACS like an app, you could probably do it. But if anybody was brave enough to be the first or to go and try and do it, it could be done. But then if you say PACS as a service, are you talking about an enterprise where multiple agencies are going to sign on to use this service as a subscriber, so to speak, as they would, you know, the GSA, you know, managed service with the cards? And I think that the answer is no. And early on, I've always said, why doesn't the government just come up with a baseline of specs for a PACS that everybody has to follow to ensure the interoperability? And then if you want CCTV or intrusion or whatever bells and whistles, then that agency works with whatever vendors providing that base model, and you get what you get. Obviously, you know, that's not going to happen either. But I think from going to a Microsoft seminar several years ago, which was actually at the Landmark building, looking at a PACS as an app, and then having client workstations, if that was your architecture, so that you had a true enterprise, it obviously is technically possible. But to get multiple agencies to sign on to the same service, even if you had a delineated and demarked segregation of rights to get in, I'm not sure if that flies.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. We have time for one last question, and this one's actually to Lars. Lars, you talked about the certification training, the CSCIP. Can you share some more of the costs and prerequisites for that course?
Okay, yes, thank you. The CSCIP is an advanced course. It is, in other words, not a beginner's course. So the prerequisite is that we have to have our attendees have a certification from a PACS manufacturer. In other words, they should be familiar with PACS systems as a whole, as a legacy PACS. It would also help if they are familiar with the FICAM requirements, such as SP 800-116, the PIV PACS document, and the FICAM roadmap of a few years ago. If we have people with that expertise and some field experience, we are going to have a very, very competent group of people. There are some folks that come in and want to go through the certification course, but not necessarily sit for the exam to get familiar with the processes and the legislation and what they have to do. We have several people from various procurement people from various agencies that say that we are, after all, the front line of people that come in and make verbal presentations to us, and we're going to sift through some of the verbal verbiage that are presented. We are also going to sift through some of the written proposals, and we have to understand enough to know what is real and what is maybe not anchored precisely in reality. So it is a wide scope, but some hands-on and expertise with fiscal access control system is definitely a prerequisite, and then some familiarity with the FICAM regulations and the OMBA 130 regulations are very helpful as well.
Yeah, I'll
cost
just conclude
is
to say that
$2,495 per person, and we have some government discount and some member discount for that too.
Thank you, Lars. I was just going to mention the government has a special rate, so please contact Lars if you want further details on that training program. It's on our website. Okay, thank you all. We're at the top of the hour now, so we're going to have to conclude today's webinar. I want to thank again our presenters and you, our audience, for participating today. And please make special note of the future webinars in the series on March 15th and April 19th, and look for an email invitation to attend those sessions. Today's participants will get an email from the Secure Technology Alliance with a link to the recording and the content that was presented today. And you're welcome to share that link, by the way, with other colleagues and interested people in your party, in your organization, who may have missed today's webinar. We want everyone to be able to experience the information that we've shared. So thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day, and goodbye for now. We're done.